Bonjour tout le monde, donc très heureux de vous avoir parmi nous ce matin. Donc je suis très heureux de vous présenter ce déjeuner causerie. En fait, la formule est simple. Vince va nous partager pendant 15-20 minutes son expérience, quelques idées sur la croissance menée par l'expérience. Et par la suite, on va avoir une période de questions-réponses. Et si vous voulez poser vos questions à ce moment-là, en français, en anglais, soyez à l'aise. Donc, sur ça, Vince.
Thank you. Welcome. I appreciate you inviting me here. It's a beautiful area. Never been to this part of Montreal before. I'm excited to speak to you today. We're going to do basically 4 things. One, I'd like to speak about my mindset over the last 45 years of retail. So I've been 4 decades of retail. And out of those 45 years, 30 have been working in Canada. So like I've worked every mall, probably 80% of the malls. So I know Canada really well. And it's been a growth for all of us, for me. So I'll talk about first my mindset and how I talk about the business. Second, we'll talk about experience-led growth, is the collaboration with myself and Ascendis on this playbook. And then we'll have some questions, and then we'll open it up to anybody who has questions. So I'd like to first start off with, and I'll click through slides, but you might not be able to see them back there, but and do I need this mic, you think?
It's up to you. I mean, if you speak up.
Yeah, I'd rather. Just tell me if you can't hear me. But so my mindset has really been, as you think about the world, is this theme: winning in a world that won't wait. Now, this theme didn't come now. You might think it's a recent theme. No, it's been something in my mind over 40 years, because the world moves that fast. Every day, I love to wake up with, how am I going to lead in the world that's always changing? And I really challenged myself to not think about hindsight, but move my team towards foresight. And that's one of the hardest things to always do, because people like to talk about outcomes, and really we have to be, as leaders, thinking about foresight. So that question every day would be my topic in my mind, and how I would come to work with my mindset. Now, how I really actually did that, though, was really connecting behaviors of the world into a retail experience. And when I think about that, I could give you an example, because you might say, well, what's that mean? So I'll study every industry. I'll look at consumer behaviors, employee behaviors, economy, technology, leadership. 5 big groups. And as I think about those, what's going on in the world, and how do I connect into retail experiences? So to example, Netflix. So 10 years ago, I was studying Netflix. I did it as a case study for the team. And I really wanted to figure out why Netflix is so successful. But then people could question, why do you worry about it in retail? So Netflix is successful is all because of one thing, not the technology, it's the binge viewing. The binge viewing is the thing that has now 800 million subscribers today in Netflix. Binge viewing, when you think about it, I pull out the words that it really matters. People are time-starved. People want personalization. They want instant gratification. They want choices. So I took all the behaviors of why binge viewing works and then apply them into retail. So you take those behaviors and you apply them and you create your strategy, which is, for me, it was digital clienteling. Took that, and how do you put it into a technology tool that will talk to customers the way they want to talk to customers? So that's an example of how I look at the world and then apply it in. And I could do hundreds of examples I could throw out there. I could throw out, something that we might be all bored with, Airbnb. But years ago when I studied Airbnb, I said to myself, I really wanted to figure out, they don't own anything. They don't own employees. They don't own houses, but they make billions of dollars. Then I apply that into supply chain and sourcing. How do you not own the product, but turn it faster? How do you then take the weeks that you could turn fabric into units and apply it in, because the theory of not owning but still optimizing it was fascinating for me. So that's where you can see the difference of the world. So these are the 6 themes. You can't really probably see them, but these are the 6 themes of my mindset. You know, why do I see the world differently, which we talked about. The world changed faster than the business. Demand is no longer controlled by the brand. Experience became the competitive advantage. And old operating models are breaking. And then we'll introduce a little bit of this experience-led growth. So why I see the world differently. So you heard me say about how I look at the world and how I really study the behaviors in 5 different groups. If somebody said to me the other day, well, who do you see as competition in retail? That was a hard question for me because I didn't see competition in retail. I saw the world and the behaviors of the world. That was the competition that we had unlocked, because if you choose to look at the retailers, do you want to be on sale? Do you want to compete with more excess? No. So you have to really think of the world and see how you're going to unlock the behaviors. But also I see the world differently because one thing I really did in my career is the theme of up is not the only way. So I grew up in this mindset is up is not the only way. So in my retail career of 45 years, I went sideways, sideways, up, sideways, sideways, up. What that meant is I ran 13 different departments. I did that intentionally because I really wanted to understand how it all connects. We live in a world of connection. So how does the buying, the sourcing, the supply chain, the stores, the store operations, the finance, the payroll, technology, analytics, you know, the circle is just massive. And it's so exciting. I was speaking at a college the other day and I said to the students, stop thinking you're going to go this way. You want to go this way and then go up. But that's how I led my career, intentionally to really understand. Also, I challenged myself to all different types of departments. So different types of departments, different types of channels, luxury, outlet, specialty, denim, dresses. It didn't matter. I wanted to learn everything. Home, vintage, because you're really not learning product, you're learning experiences and how to connect people into the product. Global, you know, the great thing about one of the things we all had global responsibility, which was great. So you learn different cultures. 30 years in working with in Canada. I kid you not, I worked in probably about every mall in Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Chinook, Toronto, and then Montreal. And it's been an amazing experience over those 30 years. So when you think, the other thing in my career I would like to think about is that I really never looked at fear. Like I really looked at, back to studying, when you study Amazon, I didn't study Amazon for the idea that it's an operating model, it's technology, it's product. I studied Amazon for the leadership part of Amazon, risk-taking, doing something that is with foresight, taking the charge ahead of time, and then just keep on growing on it. So as I look at different companies, I also look at just the leadership part of that because that's very important. In my 45 years, if somebody said to me the other day, well, what year was the most stable? And I answered the question, no year was stable. Not one. Because I created my mind that even financially, if you thought it was a stable year, you have to reinvent, you have to transform, and you have to accelerate. It didn't matter what year. You have to do those 3 all the time. Because what you want to do, and what kept me up at night is the best years, I never want to replicate them again. Because the world changes. And what's good last year, it doesn't mean it's going to be good this year. So my theory of like, if it was a good year, change it. Because you have to keep up with the times of the world. So the world changed faster than the business. Well, that's where we're at today. How fast has the business came, and where are you today, or where's the world? So, back to studying the world, one of the things I love to think about was really the fault lines. So I would say to myself, what are the fault lines that are starting to appear so that we could then offset them? And that was really critical in really thinking about the business. So if you thought about tariffs, tariffs was a big news 2-3 years ago, but the best companies really anticipated that change to then change the sourcing model 5-10 years ago to then offset tariffs, and tariffs never became a big thing. We're going to always have these things coming our way. You just have to really think about, how you're going to offset it ahead of time. Buying will completely change. Today, if you look at the 7 phases of retail that I've been in, where you see, one of those phases was, mobile and omni-channel. Now it's moved into experience-led, but something's going to come. And how do we stay ahead of it? And how do you look ahead of it? Because you have to be testing that today. Demand no longer controlled by the brand. So if you think about, if you want to bucket what are the 7 phases of the retail world, in 2003, 2004, brands were expanding, malls were expanding, square footage was expanding, more units. It was like a push down. And then obviously 2008 came and kind of settled everybody down a little bit. But then 2013 came and it was like the emerging brand of like, wow, here comes the whole DTC, mobile, omni-channel, 2013 throughout, really up to COVID. And when you think about when it all changed, the push down, it really changed in 2013 the most because of the fact of that's when people had choices. They had optionality, they had choices, and the way people shop completely changed. Before you had to go into a store or e-commerce. Now there's 12 ways a consumer could shop today. There's actually 12 ways a consumer could buy. So in my mind, I always thought through that, and we'll talk about mapping. Because we do an exercise with Ascendis is, mapping customer journeys. And we really start with those 12 theories of like, let's see the 12 ways of how consumer shops and how do we service an experience towards them. And it's a fascinating exercise because the theory of traffic and conversion is really old metrics. It's really old metrics today. Traffic, I used to say to people, they say, oh, traffic's down. I'd be like, well, did you have 375 million people walk in? Because in my mind, it was US and Canada together is 375 million people. So I said, if you had 375 million people buy, then okay, then talk to me about traffic. But in the world today, the 375 people could buy anything in 12 different ways. Online, virtual store, notify me, wish lists, in a store, in an outlet. I mean, it just goes endless. And you have to think about all that. So traffic is really, get to the 375 million people, then you have to think about that. One of the models we had to change in my mind was, we're open 24 hours. Just think about retail is not 10 to 5. It's not 10 to 5 on Madison Avenue. It's 24 hours. And how do you set a company up that you could shop 24 hours? And you could, in 12 different ways. The great thing about the demand, just to end this right here, is that say, even though the brand might lost control from pushing units down, the winning brands have even a better experience now with customers if they really build the relationships. They become more loyal now than in 2004. And that's when we talk about metrics later, and you see it all in frequency, retention, and lifetime value. You see those metrics come alive, that they are that's the number one thing to look at. Experience became the competitive advantage. Back to the world, you just had Formula One, an amazing, I've read Formula One for years because it was always on my list to say, how do we get 300,000 people here and have the experience of a lifetime? Well, that experience is memorable. You have in Montreal, which I studied in school a lot and then brought in to even my business, was Cirque du Soleil. That's the blue ocean company. As you hear about blue ocean, red ocean, that's a blue ocean company. They went in an industry that was dying and created this amazing experiences. So experience is the competitive advantage. I read the other day that Sotheby's, which is an art auction, they sold a painting for $100 million from a person virtually. Now, just think about that. I'm going to buy a painting today, not even looked at, virtually. He's from Arizona, bought it, $100 million. When you think about, well, you could sell a collection dress at $20,000 then virtually. Just think about all those experiences. The last one was my favorite, is Carvana. I studied Carvana for 10 years. The number one car in Carvana selling is the Mercedes. So when you think about why are they buying Mercedes at Carvana, not test driving it, because they're personalizing it. I want it red, I want it blue, I want it tomorrow, and I could do it from my couch. So experiences are really the number one thing, but the operating model is the experience. Okay, all the operating models are breaking. To me, back to the story of, fear. Why can't companies change, fast enough? Or you could really relate this to the world. Why do sports teams not change fast enough? I mean, you could just take this, why don't colleges? You could just move it all around the world. That's a beautiful thing with this mindset is like, every day we open our eyes. I got dropped here at 7 o'clock. First 5 seconds here, I had a great experience. We have experiences every second of the day. Beautiful room, nice people, friendly, great atmosphere. It's a great experience. But when you think about, experience, that's the key to the future of the model. And then how do you change this operating model today into that? No matter where you're starting, the good news is that you could jump in. And that's what we'll talk about in this experience-led growth. It doesn't matter, if you have 5 stores, if you don't matter have 1,000 stores. It's easy to jump in. The one last thing on this model is you really have to think about talent. One thing about talent is that, we all have longevity of people, but is the talent today going to lead you for the new world? And that only you could answer that. But when you think about that, it's not about, it's like how do you take talent and evolve them to the new world? And that's one of the big questions I think it should be really thought through, because employees, in my mindset, in our collaboration with Ascendis, the number one thing, the formula is great employee experience leads to a customer experience, leads to action, leads to results, and then evolve. So the employee experience is the number one thing that we have to really think through. So is anything that we were talking about, it doesn't matter, supply chain, product, technology. Technology is amazing. It's an amazing tool, but it's a tool. It's got to answer to something in an experience, and it's got to be employee-led. So legacy growth models are struggling with the shifts. So this is where we're at with introducing our experience-led growth. Am I good on time?
Yeah.
Just tell me if I'm like... So with the collaboration with Ascendis, I took all my 45 years and I said to myself, okay, so what could we give back? Today, as you know, I retired from Ralph Lauren after 21 years and the 45 years of the business. And I do a third. I consult, I board work, and then I do a lot of nonprofit work. And it's in all three. I live in Manhattan, so in the city with my family. And when you think about this idea about experience-led growth, it really started with the idea that, hey, I like to give back. I really, teach at colleges here and there. So I really started thinking it, and then obviously I met Rami and Todd in New York, and then, great thinking and partnership. We have this thing called experience-led growth. And there's 12 chapters, which I'm sure Todd and Kareem could share. But the 12 chapters are really basically, I'll read them to you. Structural shifts, experience drives growth, channels, establishing the single customer truth, mapping the real customer journey, defining clear channel roles in an ecosystem, defining signature experiences before loyalty, activating employees as the loyalty engine, redesigning metrics for compounding growth, loyalty as a behavioral accelerator, leadership alignment, and the compounding effect of experience-led growth. So those are the 12 chapters. Now the good thing with this playbook is that you could jump into any part of it, and and I was with Rami yesterday, and he said, the other thing about this is that you could actually start at 10 and go backwards. I mean, he said to me, what book could go the other way? And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I did try to read a book backwards one time. It's very interesting how you see it from the punchline back. And back to learning, that made me think about my strategy sessions when I did that exercise, reading the book backwards. So that's why when I start with strategy, I don't start with all our problems. I talked about, what do we want to be? What's the outcome that you want to be? How do you want people to feel when they shop your store online? Every detail is an experience, every detail. No matter what, you might think it's casual, everybody's shopping online, it's an experience. In your store, it's an experience. So when you think about, I said, I would start every strategy with outcome back. Like, what's the outcome you want? I want faster turns in product. Okay, then go back. And that usually starts with sourcing, by the way. But these are the 12 chapters. We'd love to share them with you at one point. We'll go some high-level things here. But just to give you a story, because I actually have, in one of my consultings, I'm working through this with a company. And somebody said to me, well, how do you get it going? How do you start it? And really, I saw it as every company's different. So after like a 30-day deep dive of everything, like literally the whole complete circle, everything. And I say the whole complete circle because everything connects. You'd be fascinated at the idea of this topic of what I think indirect impact. Things that you think are not giving you an ROI are giving you the ROI. It's just fascinating that you might think they're not giving you an ROI, but if they're building an experience, they're giving you the ROI. It's kind of like when people say, do you want to expand in different countries? And to me, it's always yes. That answer for me is always yes, because you get to reinvent anything you want to reinvent because they know no better. So you start over, and then you change slowly to that new world. But the company I was working with, in 30 days, I was like, okay, we're going to take 6 to 7 steps really quick. We're going to pull all the data, because the data will at least tell you. Sometimes your data will tell you what you don't have, of course, but what do you have? And then start attaching the data to experiences and behaviors. Just understand the data. And really, I love what I used to say. They used to say to me, oh, Vince, you're a myth buster. because I love when people say, it's this and it's completely this. That's fine, because that's why data plays that role. Then from data, I went into mindset. Like, really, does the senior team have the mindset of, like, what is it going to take for the company to do really well? What's the outcome the senior team really wants to do? Then that was really quick, and then we moved into what I call mapping the customer journey. And that's what Ascendis does really strong. But when you think about mapping the customer journey, let's really think about this. It's 12 ways of shopping. What's their services? What's their experiences you want them to have? What's the employee role in that? What's the tools for the employee? How does technology overcome as a solution of this? Technology adds in the solution. Then you move into what's the new metrics you want to go against, and what's reporting look like? Because reporting could be the silent killer of a company, reporting. Because if that's where the complexity comes in. They could have all the numbers in the world, but you don't know how to apply them to the experience, it doesn't matter. That's why old metrics like conversion and traffic are still being talked about, but they're really not something I'd be looking at. They're outcomes of your strategy. So there's just outcomes of your strategy. And then when you wake up one morning, you say, oh, I got a 5% conversion, let's promote. Conversion leads to promotions. That's not the formula. So data, mindset, mapping, metrics, sequencing the experience, the employee, reporting. Then, while that work's getting done, assortments on the right. What do you want the assortments to be cross-channel? So assortments play this role of, like, yeah, you could be 5 channels, 6 channels, but you have to really think about the assortments at that point. And when you think about assortments, the same conversation should be supply chain and sourcing at the same time. One doesn't go without the other. Back to the interconnected system. You can't have a great assortment without a great supply chain and sourcing. It just doesn't work. And then from there, let's not forget our finance friends, budgets. Because one of my mindsets of budgets is I never really worried about a yearly budget. Yes, I worked for 3 companies in 45 years, all owner-led to public. So all 3 companies, I only worked for 3 companies in 45 years, all owner-led to public. So yes, you have to have reporting and you have to have budgets and all that stuff. But budgets, in my mind, was a rolling 12. It was a continuous budget. I mean, like if somebody came to you in October as leaders and said, I got a great thing that's going to drive ROI at $100,000, are you going to say no? I'd be like, great. And do you want the mindset of the employee to say, I can't do something because it doesn't fit in the budget? Reverse it. We want to do something all the time. Show me the ROI. And the empowerment of the employees then says, oh, I can't do this because I have a budget, gets removed. And the idea of we're hunting for something all the time becomes real. And who would not spend $100,000 that's not in the budget to get back a lot of money? Everybody would do that. So the budget really thinks about, back to this interconnected system, it's so critical. I don't have a tech budget. Well, what's the ROI? Now you have a tech budget. I did RFID 10, 15 years ago when no one wanted to do RFID. But the foresight was, yes, I want to be able to allocate by size from sourcing instantly. That was the outcome. The experience was customers will win, employees will win, and then we built the mindset of every store localization. If you sort the United States, LA, New York, Miami, it's all 3 different assortments. How could you think that it's all going to fit? Or why would Chicago be the same sizes of Vancouver? It's localized assortments. So 10, 15 years ago, RFID changed that whole model. The last piece of this was with the group that I worked on is skill gaps. Okay, great, we all feel good, but now what are the skill gaps that we have to go after? And how do we either get them there or bring in skill gaps? And there's also a lot of times that people do things, they do this like, oh, we need a chief experience officer, chief digital, a lot of chiefs. That's not the answer. The answer is the senior team being on one mission. That's the answer. With this forward-thinking mindset. Because all these chiefs doesn't mean that you're going to get any results. It's just like technology. How many people threw, oh, we need this. And now you have systems that don't talk to each other, or you have systems that are not solving what you really need them to solve. You just have systems, because somebody told you along the way you needed a system. But if it didn't fit in the circle, then you really didn't need the system. The last part of this is really testing. You know, how do you test and innovate? Test and innovate, test and innovate. Testing is a very valuable tool, as long as you have the right mindset, whoever is testing. Because without the mindset of the test could fail because the execution was never good and you could miss a big opportunity. So as you think about testing, you might need somebody just for testing to keep this like neutral. Okay, how am I doing? 2 minutes. I got the flag here, which is good, because I could speak forever then. Yeah, so not, you know, in 2 minutes I don't know what to leave you with because I have so many like exciting things here, but and you know, these are some of the key chapters of each, which you know, we could, these are like some of the chapters which I kind of touched on throughout the whole thing, but let me see if there's one. We touched on that one. You know, designing signature experiences before loyalty. You know, a lot of people, once again, say, oh, I want to hear about a loyalty program. Well, that's like the last thing, because the operating model, you have to really, it's a sequence. You really have to think about how you introduce loyalty when the operating model is in the right direction. Your experiences, your behaviors, your talent, then you bring in loyalty. Loyalty, though, is happening every day. Because you don't think you have a loyalty program because you don't have points or something like that, loyalty is happening every day. You just have to come to the conclusion. That's how you have to think about it. Like, loyalty to me, in my mind, was everyday interaction with an employee or a customer. That's what's building this. And how the technology is going to help us move faster to do that. I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is, you know, don't compete within your industry. That's what, I mean, I'm like crazy about this idea. Like, I'm just crazy about, look, open your eyes. And the transformation really starts with us, you. As a little kid, when we fly, I was always fascinated by the idea of like, and I'm sure you heard this, like, why put your mask on the airplane and not your family's? That resonated with me at 20 years old. I was saying, well, I'm gonna put it on my mother. And you know, the idea stuck with me for 40 years. You have to transform in order for your team to transform. So that was my whole mindset growing up, is like, you know, I had to lead the pike of transformation. You just can't wait for somebody else to do that. And yeah, I would say back to the industry, if somebody said, who's your best competitive in selling? And I would say the Four Seasons. Because if you go to Four Seasons in anywhere in the world, you have an amazing experience. So I actually studied them. I actually went to Disney World for weeks to understand why they could manage millions of people in a park in Orlando. Like, simple. And it's so fascinating. Do you know that when they, you know, they have RFID, so they could tell you, so they put RFID just for experiences. They know you're coming back to the hotel, here's your towels. Oh, Mr. or Mrs., they know you're at a restaurant, they're coming over to you. They know when something's backed up in a line to do what? Bring people. They know how you feel if you take one of the mountain, and what's the concession stand right there? So you take, you go Space Mountain, what's your concession stand on the experience after you want a snow cone. Here it is. So the world is fascinating. You just have to really open your eyes. Thank you.